this committee, and I represent Senate District 8, which goes from Dunbarton down to Connecticut River with Charlestown and Claremont. And I saw Representative Cordelli, so I'm assuming that he will be in here shortly. Now, we can take a look at the minutes from the last meeting. Any motion to accept the minutes? Representative, we're looking at the minutes.
Thank you. I did have one question. I did have one. Any uses for that? Can you see it? I did have one question. That was on second page, third paragraph. Representative Cordelli, if include compliance report. Okay. I think the intent there is if we include the compliance report in the annual report, then I would like to see documentation. Is that, I think that's probably what my intent was.
We would like to see
Right. So if we include the compliance report in the annual report, I think it's,
Do you want the compliance report included in the?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, okay.
that.
Anything else?
none.
So I have a motion to accept the minutes?
I'll move. Minutes?
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So the minutes are accepted. Now, my intent was to start to discuss the yearly, at the end of the year report, the report that's due on November 30th. Now, Representative Cordelli wants the compliance report to be part of the yearly report. And we still have to address the charge that we have in the RSA. To monitor the implementation, and the impact of education funding in the local district schools. And I think that Senator Altshuler has said that she has some data that she wanted to present, but she did not bring it to the last meeting, so hopefully she will bring it to this meeting. Representative Hicks, do you have specific things that you think should be included?
Nothing that has not already been mentioned
Okay,
multiple times.
okay. Representative Cordelli, besides,
Yes.
yeah,
In addition to the compliance report, an update on compliance with what was indicated in the report by Children's Scholarship Fund. The items that were pointed out by the department, what has the action been? I think that 4 out of 5 have been completed in the last together as a result
Okay.
of the compliance report recommendations.
Thank you.
We're talking about what should be included in the yearly report, and I know that from the last meeting, you had some data that you wanted to share with the committee.
I do. So this is regarding, a statement that I made that I wanted to back up with some data about, schools that are using the EFA program to supplement their own financial aid packages.
Okay.
So, and that, that's certainly not, that was not the intention of the EFA program to supplant what schools may have been offering. And certainly, I don't know that we intended to create a cottage industry of schools looking for these vouchers prior to tapping their own resources that they had previously been using before the state started subsidizing private school tuition. So I did say that this was something that was happening, that was being advertised on websites, and so I took the liberty of having some of these printed out so you can see the schools, how it is that they're advertising it on their website, and also, that the diocese itself has made a commitment to make scholarships available to anyone who wants them, so that their child can participate in this type of education, and that, perhaps this program has morphed into something that it never intended to be. Also wanted to demonstrate, because someone had brought up about private schools, and low-income students having access to private schools. And at the back of this program, at the back of this package, you can see that there's a couple of schools that I've given as examples that are two of the most expensive here in the state, Phillips Exeter Academy and St. Paul's School, and both of those schools guarantee tuition for families who may have $125,000 or less as income. So just wanted to put that out there that, they're private schools who are accountable only to themselves, have these programs in place, and that perhaps our program, is a little out of the bounds, or should be out of bounds for them. So I wanted to make sure you had that data in your hands, and I'm happy to email it to you as well.
No, I think this is fine. Representative Padella?
Yes, I was involved with this program at the beginning. I don't think that there was ever an intent that a family that was getting an education freedom account would not be eligible for an additional scholarship from a private institution. Very often those scholarships from private institutions still put the tuition out of the reach of many New Hampshire families. So it was never the intent that I ever heard in all the testimony, people that I worked with, that a EFA student or a tax credit scholarship student would be ineligible for any additional scholarship made available by a private school.
No, if I could clarify, I think perhaps perhaps you misunderstood what I'm trying to get across, is in the first page, you know, the diocese, the Catholic, Diocese of New Hampshire says, our mission is to make Catholic school accessible, available, and affordable to any family that desires it. So I did not assert that it should, acquiring an EFA program should disqualify someone from another financial aid program. Indeed, that's not our purview, because private schools get to make their own rules about who gets financial aid and who doesn't. What was asserted, because I was also around at the inception of this program, and the pitch for the program is that getting into a private school and being able to afford it was out of reach for low-income families. And what I am asserting is that in the Catholic school environment, there was a commitment, a financial commitment, to get any student that wanted to be part of that education the money to do so. And since we have brought this program into place, this group, which is not an insignificant group here in New Hampshire, has now taken this program as part of their financial aid package that they didn't need prior to us instituting it, and have incorporated it as part of their financial aid programming. On page 2 of the packet, it said, you can see right on there that your very first thing that you have to do before you apply for financial aid is submit an application for your New Hampshire Freedom account. And so the Catholic schools are asking parents to go get state money before they apply for money from their institution. So we are supplementing and subsidizing these institutions. That was my point.
Okay.
Thank you.
Representative Padelli.
Thank you. I know of a family in my district that has 5 children, grandchildren, that they are educating. Actually, they're educating through 8 grandchildren, 3 of whom are being homeschooled and 5 of whom are going to a Christian school. They're using EFAs for those students, but that still does not come up to the tuition requirements for that school. And there are all sorts of GoFundMe pages and donors being contacted to try and make up the difference for those 5 children so that they can continue going to that Christian school.
Okay, so I think this is a separate issue that certainly can't be, we can have a paragraph about it and define a report. I don't think that's the main thing that we have to consider in this report. One of the things that we're supposed to look at is the impact on local schools because of the EFA program. I say that again, the committee shall monitor the implementation of RSA 194-F, including the impact of state education funding to local district schools. So has anybody found any evidence of negative or positive impact on local schools because of the EFA program?
I have not.
No?
Well, yes, I would say that our projected costs of $27.6 million a year diverted out of the education trust fund is an impact of public funds on public schools. So yeah, that's actually a tremendous impact. That's an impact.
But I think you have to qualify it or quantify it. In what way is it an impact and how has it in fact impacted local schools?
Are you looking for a specific, like now they can buy fewer pencils? Or
No. I'm
can't,
looking
I
for-
mean, what is what are you looking for a quantification? So that I can
Well-
meet you where you are.
If you say that the $27 million are impacting local schools, then I would have to ask in what way does it impact, not giving it to them, but giving it to a different way of educating children. The local schools last year got $169 million that was divided between the district schools depending on their needs. So it seems to me they got a big infusion of money to run their schools. We know that the total amount of the number of children in New Hampshire has gone down significantly, and yet over the whole time, educational costs in public school has gone up. And I think we need to take a look at that and find out why is it this way. I don't think you can say that because we have an EFA program that allows children to choose another school, that does not excuse the public schools who are getting the state funded money, that they don't have a responsibility for stewarding the money that they get.
Okay, so on that note, in the stewarding of the money, we have a lack of transparency in this program, because with the stewardship of the money going to public schools, that money goes through school budgets, which are public information, and we are able to participate at the municipal level on making the decisions on how to spend that money, not also including the fact that the state has, specifications on how the money is spent. And to say that you can't realize an impact from $27 million projected to a program that has no oversight. We don't know where the money goes. There's a lack of transparency and oversight because it goes into the program, and we don't know if families actually do qualify. We had a survey, and there were families who didn't qualify who were still in the program. We know that people have come here and testified and said, yeah, I actually make more, but I'm in the program and I'm gonna stay in the program. So they qualified when the program first started, and now their income is more than if they had tried to get in now, but they're gonna stay in the program. But we don't know that because we can't verify people's income because we haven't asked for it. So there's a lot of verification of how this money is spent that is lacking, and to say that you can't quantify an impact, I think is, I don't necessarily know that that's true. I would suggest that we bring this program in-house and stop using a third-party vendor that refuses or does not submit to auditing, which is unusual for any contract in the state. That we bring it into the Department of Education so that then we go through a rulemaking process to decide what counts as an educational expense, because right now we have this third-party vendor who decides what's going to be an educational expense, and the state pays for those educational expenses but has no input as to what that actually is. Not to mention the fact that they take off the top to do this program. What I think a good suggestion I would like to make in our report, that we recommend to the legislature that we bring this program in-house.
Bring this program under the auspices of the DOE?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Sure.
You may have to write that minority report all on your own.
Why is it a minority? I thought we were talking about a general report.
Well, we have a general report, but there are times when one or two people don't agree on the general report, and in which case you can write your own report. So if there's something that is very important to you to have and the others don't necessarily agree, then you can write your own report and they'll go together with the other one, but.
Well,
you
yeah.
know what, So,
Having
That's fine.
served, I understand that, but
Okay.
I'd like to keep the discussion open to this being the
Yeah.
general report and not automatically marginalize it out to minority.
okay, that's perfectly fine. What I'm saying is that not everybody, there are sometimes, there's a big chunk that people do not agree on, but you still like to make that available to anybody else reading the report, and then you can write that report.
Understood.
That
So
happened
is
last
the
time.
anticipation that there will be 2 reports, because we only had 1 report last time?
No, we had 2 reports last time,
Okay, all right.
yes, and a majority and a minority report. Representative Cordelli.
Thank you. I have heard this red herring about the program taking away money from the public schools, and I would just like someone, anywhere, tell me what public school in New Hampshire has not gotten the money that they have been promised according to state law. Is there one? I would love to hear from them. What school has not gotten the money that they are entitled to under current state law? Number 2, about not submitting to an audit. There is an audit underway from the EFA program. I met with the auditors a week and a half ago. They are working on it. I can tell you who the auditors are. I met with them. They asked me if I had any thoughts on the audit. So I went, I came down to Concord and met with them. So there is an audit underway.
Do you have a point 3?
Point 3. I'll cut it off at 3 for now.
Okay.
In terms of the Education Trust Fund also, and the money in the Education Trust Fund, there are other uses for that money from the Education Trust Fund, in addition to the adequacy payments to school districts. School building aid comes to mind. The phase-out grants for school districts come from the Education Trust Fund. There are a whole series of uses for that money from the Education Trust Fund. And if there is ever not enough money in the Education Trust Fund to cover those expenses that are promised under state law, it is specified in there that the governor is to draw a warrant to take money from the general fund to cover those promised expenses.
I just mentioned the $169 million that was just recently given out to the schools in New Hampshire. And I don't think we have a report of what each individual school did with that money. So talking about auditing and talking about responsibility, I think that there are a lot of things missing. If we're gonna pick on one, we should pick on everyone.
With respect, we're not picking on anybody. We're evaluating this program and looking for deficiencies and looking for places where we can be better. And auditing, and if anyone's unclear about where their public school money is going, it's available to you. It's probably on your school's website. If it's not, calling your superintendent can bring that right up to your inbox. It turns out that being in the legislature gets your emails responded to very quickly. So asking your superintendent how the money is being spent, if you're unclear or you haven't been part of your own school boards or school departments spending, it's available to us. What's not available to us is how the money is being spent in the EFA program. And so dialing back to that, I would like to have in the report that there's a recommendation that we audit the program expeditiously and not so that we see where all of the money is going. And I think that it would be better to bring it under the Department of Education so that we can, and also add in an annual application that verifies annual income as people come into the program. It's not, it doesn't honor the program's intention to let people stay in the program when their income is well over the entry level. And so that's someplace where we have an opportunity to tighten that up.
I'll make a comment first and then you can do it. Yes, we have an opportunity to tighten things up, but on the other hand, if you have a child that has started in a school and now mom or dad has got a better job and they earn a little bit more, now you're gonna pull that kid out of school and put them somewhere else because they have gone over the income limit, and that disrupts the child's education, and I don't think that is a particularly good thing.
Well, if the parent is making more money, shouldn't they be putting their resources into paying for this education that they have committed to? And I believe at the last meeting, we had, one of our members, maybe it's in the minutes, go on and on about how people move.
Yep.
You know, and children get pulled out of their educational places. As someone who had to make 8 moves in 11 years when my children were young, based on work opportunities, it happens. It's not great. Kids really don't love it, but it does happen. And when you make a commitment to, as a parent, with a parenting decision, you know, you are responsible for that commitment. If you enter into a program that says, this program is for people that have 350% of poverty as their annual income, and then your annual income is more, and you stay in the program, how is that fair to the people that weren't able to get into the program who maybe wanted to? If you're making more money, spend your resources on your commitments. That's, you know, I would never, to ask the taxpayers to pay for a choice that you've made as a parent when all manners of choices are available to you, and you want to make an additional expenditure, we're not supposed to be making up that money for you. That's not how any of this works. We have 3 opportunities for children to receive public education in this state: public schools, public brick and mortar schools, public charter schools, and VLAX, the Virtual Learning Academy. Those are 3 things that we pay for. And we also now subsidize parents who want to go into the private school sector or homeschool. We subsidize that now too. And to say that we should continue to subsidize families who are well above the entry level of the income is not, it's not fair to the rest of the state. And also, it's not a good use of our money, because we throw this money into this program and then we don't ask how it's spent. We don't have any metrics on how students fare in this program. We don't know. We have nothing coming back. So on that note, I would, I have another suggestion, that we limit the types of educational expenses which can be funded by the vouchers to, tuition only, for instance. And that when a school year is over, we recoup the unused money from that voucher account, throw it back in, and start from 0, just like with financial aid programs. So I've got a couple other suggestions that I'd love to have in this report as suggestions for legislation.
Okay, let me listen to Representative Codelli.
Do you want to, Representative Ladd hasn't,
I'd like to, if I may, I haven't said a word yet. There you go. I'm looking at an article right in front of me right now. More New Hampshire families than ever are opting into school choice, prompting questions about how to measure success. That was an NHPR report dated July 30, 2024. I'm looking at enrollment in public schools since 2000, through 2023, enrollments dropped 23.7%. I'm looking at the cost per pupil from 2000 to 2023, and the cost per pupil has gone from $11,192 to $20,323 per pupil. I'm looking at charter school enrollments, which are up 30%. Why is this happening? I'd like to flip this conversation around from the EFAs doing what, negative things, or whatever direction we're going here, to looking at education as a total. Compulsory education in the state speaks to 4 areas: private, public, homeschooling, and EFAs. This is one of the choices this state has seen as an option for education. And apparently there are parents out there that see this as the best fit, and their children are succeeding.
How do we know that?
The parent is the best judge of that. The parent is the best judge of that. And also we do have a requirement that you either do a nationally normed test, you do the statewide assessment, or you have a teacher that's certified to do the assessment of the portfolio. I'm at the point where I'm saying it's time to stop bickering between one choice and another, and for us to support all these options available and to properly do so without cutting down one or the other. Thank you.
Representative Deli.
Thank you. In terms of the senator's suggestions, I point out that both of those options for legislation have been submitted in the past on multiple occasions and have been defeated in the legislature each time. And there has already been legislation supported for this coming year in terms of an annual review of eligibility. But that has been submitted at least 3 times previously and has been defeated. In terms of accountability, I entirely agree with Representative Ladd, and that the best form of accountability is parental accountability. And I would say that we do have and could request information on the number of students in the EFA program who leave the EFA program the following year to return to their resident school district. The numbers I've seen, and it's been a while, but very small percentage of EFA students are leaving that program to return to their public school. And I think that that shows a very valid measure of satisfaction with the program. And I think at the last meeting we talked about parental satisfaction surveys, and that is part of the requirement in tax credit scholarship, and I would like to see that as a requirement in the EFA program as well, and maybe in the public schools as well. How about that?
Representative Hicks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that from what I'm hearing here is we're talking about different types of accountability. I don't want to put words in people's mouths, but what I'm hearing is educational attainment as one type of accountability and parental satisfaction as another type of accountability, and I just can't square how those are equal. I mean, as an educator, someone's looked at a lot of data, I would prefer to look at educational attainment and other measures. We can debate which measures are the best, but I think that looking at actual education attainment is the type of accountability that I would be looking for.
Representative Ladd.
And I agree with Representative Hicks here, that the objective data is always another, one of the positive ways of really seeing whether we have academic achievement or not. And that can be done by 2 of those measures that I spoke to, the nationally normed reference test or the statewide assessment. And maybe perhaps I would be supportive of looking at those 2 forms of assessment in terms of where are the kids coming from. But I also believe, Representative Cordelli, that parent satisfaction, the student being back in school, some of these students that are in EFAs were ones that were really not doing well where they were currently placed. And so they're back in school. That in itself is a tremendous gain. That we're going to see people, students being completers. But I would like to say one other thing that I would like to maybe see entered into the report. We did look at a component of the 194F, which deals with the Parent Education Provider Advisory Committee, which is, I believe, comprised of 7 people, and it's from 4 different counties and all that, appointed by the director. I think that that's fine, and that the mission of that was to look at how we're implementing this, how we're administering this program, and how we're improving upon this program. We're dealing with areas right now in our report of how to do the, especially the improving or the looking at that program in terms of implementation. But this is something also that committee that, I won't call it an oversight committee, but the advisory committee should be doing. And I'd like to ensure that that is being done, and being done in a way that it's coming in from those voices which are going to be providing the information that the administration of that program really needs to hear in case there is something that maybe needs improvement, without having something come back on them.
Representative Cordelia, you're talking about the Parent Education Service Provider Advisory Commission? Is that what you were just referring to?
Representative Ladd?
I'm sorry, Lad, my bad, sorry.
Yeah, that's called the,
Yeah, 194F5, yes.
Right.
The
yeah, that's right, yeah.
7
Education-
members from 4 counties, yes.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. So incorporating them as more than just a, right now they hadn't been assembled until I think the last meeting we had, or shortly before that. And so, but requiring that they assemble and have more responsibility, right?
Well,
Rather than just reviewing complaints.
Yes, and further though, item 1 right in 194F:5 reads, there is established the Parent and Education Service Provider Advisory Commission
Yes.
to assist the scholarship organization by providing recommendations about 1, implementing, 2, administering, and 3, improving the EFA program. I'd like to know how that's going, and that is going to be a public meeting, I understand, seeing it's required here in statute, and it should be posted and knowledgeable when it's going to occur. Everything we do is done that way. So I think that it's another good way to find out from parents who are having their children in the program, you know, how the program is moving forward, or where it may need some assistance.
I think we discussed that
We
particular
did.
item.
Yes, we did.
Mr. Sutherland, do you have any information on how that thing is going?
I believe that they are meeting on October 23rd.
October what?
On the 23rd.
26th?
23.
The
Third.
23rd to hear. Yes.
23.
Yes, sorry.
That's this week,
Correct.
Friday.
Wednesday.
What day is it? Today's the 21st. It's Wednesday.
Yeah, I believe it's the 23rd, but I'll email the committee right after this meeting and double check. just to make sure.
Come on.
So that group has some responsibilities.
Yes.
Well, they don't have, it says they're providing recommendations, but we don't know, that, like, we could tighten that up with, to the legislature, to the education committee. Right now, they don't have to provide any reports, they haven't even met yet. I mean, it's been so unclear that, I believe we had Ms. Kate Baker Demers tell us that, she had not convened the organization, or the commission, because in her reading, it was only to review appeals of education service provider denials. So, after we discussed that, no, there's might be a different reading, it's now coming together. So perhaps that's another space to tighten up the legislation to make that clear for future groups. With respect to what Representative Ladd was saying about the metrics, like the normed tests and the portfolios, I agree that that students should be having how their progress is going measured in some way. But those measures aren't being evaluated with respect to the EFA's efficacy, right? We don't know if a student who is enrolled in an EFA-related program is meeting any benchmarks. We just don't know, because we don't require any reporting out from the private schools that get the EFA programming. We don't require submitting that portfolio data from homeschooling families to the Department of Education. We don't put this all together. And perhaps that's another space where in 194 F4, I'm sorry, F3, I'm sorry, F3, that we tighten up and, maintaining a portfolio and submitting it for evaluation. Having students take statewide assessment tests, it's great, but how they do? Is this money like being well spent? Are they engaging in a program where they're learning anything? We don't know. So, to be able to track that information, that's a space, 194 F3 would be a space where we could also look to tighten up.
Representative Ladd.
I'd like to just remind everybody here that we do not use a norm reference test or a statewide test for grades K through 2. If we're talking about a similar type situation in the EFAs, a norm reference test is not going to do a heck of a lot for a kid in grade 1 or 2. Even kindergarten, I'm really on the outside. So if somebody can provide another way of assessing other than having a qualified certified teacher coming in and looking at that portfolio, talking with the child, talking with the parent, I don't want to get into the business of having to do a norm reference test. And I've seen that occur years and years ago when we did reading for the kids at that level. We used the Gates McGandy, which could go down even lower, and the results really weren't that accurate. So even though there's a norm reference group, a national group and all that, I'd be careful. Because what kind of norm reference testing are we getting from our public school kids in grades K through 2? We're doing nothing. It's a local decision.
But it seems to me that the EFA is not a program. It is money given to students so they can have another way of education besides the public school. For example, they can go to a private school. Now, if this child goes to a private school, he or she has to follow the rules and the testing and whatever that private school is doing. Why would the EFA student be looked upon differently than all the other kids who go to the same private school? I don't see how we can put a tag on any child who receives the EFA money and feel that they're going to perform a certain way or not perform a certain way. They're getting the money to go to a school that better suits them. I don't look upon the EFA as a bona fide program, so you go to this EFA program, and now you're gonna be tested because we don't know how you're gonna do. If I send my kid to Exeter with an EFA help, that child is gonna go to Exeter, go through the same rigorous education that they have, go through all the programs, go through the testing, and that's what it is. He or she should not be pulled out because they have EFA help to be looked upon differently with the testing.
Well, on that, when you say that, we put together a rigorous, curriculum requirements and like slews of legislative requirements on our public schools because we're spending public dollars. So the legislature feels and, demands that when we are stewarding public taxpayer money, that there is accountability for that taxpayer money, and that when it is spent on education, that now, we have had enormous debates on whether or not we should be requiring our students, and by these students, I mean the 90% plus of New Hampshire students that attend public schools. We debated, all of us have been in the legislature since the issue of whether civics should be taught, right? And we make that a requirement. That's a graduation requirement. And why do we make that a requirement? Because we pay for it. And we want students to learn certain things. And so we set some requirements in the curriculum. If we're gonna send money for educational purposes, why is an EFA student different from any other student that receives state money? If you want to be free from any sort of accountability to government for spending government dollars, don't spend government dollars. You can homeschool and do it without spending government dollars. You can get, as we know from Catholic schools, a Catholic school education without government dollars. You can get private school education, as backed up here, from private schools without government dollars. But when government dollars come into play, then the government gets to find out what you do with the money. Was that money spent? We evaluate how we spend our money all the time, in every other avenue. And this seems to be the one place where you do, since when does the government just say you do you and pass out checks?
Okay,
Yeah.
so the EFA students get something like $5,000. That's what the cost is to the state, $5,000 a year. The charter schools, the cost to the state is roughly $10,000 per kid. The cost of the children in public school is closer to $22,000 a year. So how do you figure that one out? And not only that, but an awful lot of our children in public schools are failing miserably in reading, math, and science.
How do we know that? I know that that's been
Because
said a few times, but where is that data? I've not seen that at all. I'm
It is
curious.
available, you can find it.
Well, well, if you say you can find it, you should be able to back it up with where you
I
found
can back
it.
it up, I don't have the papers with me right now, but I can back it up.
Great.
Madam Chair, if I could
Representative
respond,
Padelli.
if I could respond to that, there is data readily available on the Department of Education iPlatform website regarding proficiency levels. We even have data now available by town, and the proficiency levels for the students from each town that, for instance, go into a cooperative school district. I know I've looked at my cooperative school district, and it's very, very interesting to see the differences in proficiency levels for those students. For instance, I was just looking at my district's proficiency level for English. It is 51% of the district students are proficient. For math, it is 43%, and for science, it is 31%. 31%. Now, going back to the idea of EFAs in a program, we always hear from opponents of this program that they're vouchers. Vouchers. Let me take a second to again talk about the difference between a voucher and this program, which is under the generic name of an education savings account. A voucher program has the money going directly to a particular school. So if this were a voucher program, the money for parent for child X would go directly to Bishop Brady, for instance. That does not happen. The money goes to an account for the family to use to educate their children. And another point, at that point, it is no longer public money. Let me quote from Chief Justice Roberts, writing in the Carson versus Macon case. It was a Maine case, actually. Chief Justice Roberts wrote, "A neutral benefit program in which public funds flow to a religious organization through the independent choice of private benefit recipients does not offend the Establishment Clause." I can get you the quotes from Zellman versus Simmons Harris along the same lines. When that money goes to the parents, it is no longer public money, it is private funds to be used to educate that child.
So that I'm clear, Representative Cordelli, when we collect tax dollars and put them in a government account, and then subsequently transfer those tax dollars into an EFA, there's some magic that happens and it now becomes not taxpayer collected money?
It becomes private benefit funds to be used to educate that child. Do we want to, we can look at very many public benefit programs. How about Pell Grants? Pell Grants go to a family and they select the college, they select the school where they want to send that child. There are many, how about Section 8 housing? We provide Section 8 funds to a family, but we don't tell them what apartment complex that they have to move into.
Any further thoughts?
I can appreciate I can appreciate looking for the justification, but those are, comparing about Section 8 housing vouchers, because they're vouchers, to educational vouchers, is not the same, because we actually have a lot of requirements on how Section 8 vouchers are spent. And you also have to apply for them repeatedly, you don't just get it for life.
And we have a lot of restrictions on how education trust fund money is to be spent. And there is a great process that we've heard about many times that has gone through to verify that all the expenses are allowed according to statute.
Okay. Another recommendation,
Yes.
another recommendation from the last year, November, was that we wanted a definition of successful graduation versus program completion. Now, I don't know if there is when I complete a program, but I wasn't graduated from the program, and it seems to me that the graduation has to do with the points or the grades that you got in the different subject matters. So I don't know why that is an issue. Could somebody help me, because that was one of the questions from last year.
sorry, could you rephrase the question? I didn't follow the question, I'm sorry.
We wanted a definition of a successful graduation
Yes.
versus program completion.
Right. So that is, you know, we have a lack of required student performance in the EFA program. So we don't have any aggregate information how students in these programs are performing. As opposed to, we know exactly how students perform in the public schools, because we measure it. We require things, we measure it. We don't measure in the voucher program. We don't ask for, you know, if you're saying they finish out the program because they turned 18, if you finish out a high school graduation in New Hampshire, you have to have completed a certain number of classes in certain topics. That is not the case with money given from the New Hampshire voucher program to students who turn 18. There's no comparison. So perhaps being able to require some sort of measured student performance or access to aggregate information, so that we can measure progress toward mastering any competencies that we consider part of an adequate education. So, you know, if we're gonna pay for adequate education, let's find out if they got an adequate education.
So this student is now in Exeter with help of EFA. Are you saying
Are you
that
saying
that child?
Phillips Exeter Academy or Exeter High School?
No, Exeter Academy,
Okay,
a private school, getting a little bit of extra help with the EFAs. Are you assuming that that child will receive an adequate education, a good education? Or do you feel that this particular EFA student needs to be pulled out and checked out separately because he or she happens to have an EFA account?
do we evaluate programs that we pay for with the education trust fund? That's what we're talking about. So while we have you could say that some students who qualify for EFAs would be at Phillips Exeter Academy, and I might suggest to you that New Hampshire students who qualify for EFAs are already getting free tuition from Phillips Exeter Academy, because that's how, that is in the packet that I handed to you. Same thing at St. Paul's. So they wouldn't necessarily be taking the EFA since they're all, or maybe they would so they can do extracurriculars, because we allow for that too. I don't know. But we don't evaluate the student who went to Phillips Exeter Academy, nor do we evaluate the student who did a homeschool program, nor do we evaluate the student who went to, you know, any of these, you know, Bishop Brady High School. We don't evaluate anyone who went to Cardinal Lefroy School. We don't evaluate Concord Christian Academy. Are those all comparable educations? Homeschools, Concord Christian Academy, Phillips Exeter, are they comparable? We don't know. We don't evaluate them, because in New Hampshire, school choice means you can leave the public offerings and go get something else if you want to, and we are hands off, because we're not paying for it. But now we're paying for it, so maybe we need to evaluate.
Representative Codelli.
In terms of evaluation, I just talked a moment ago about proficiency levels at my school district locally. For instance, 51%, 43%, 31%, but 90% of the students graduate. How do we evaluate that?
Are you asking how your public school evaluates graduation
Just
requirements?
Generally, how do we evaluate the difference in those numbers in terms of graduation versus proficiency levels? And I don't think it's related just to my school district. I think if you look at the school districts across the state, looking at proficiency levels versus graduation rates. How do we evaluate that? What does that mean?
Well, Hampshire statewide assessment system, so,
Right, and that produces the proficiency scores.
okay, so there's your evaluation.
So there's no correlation
But do
between
you wanna-
proficiency and graduation.
Are you suggesting that we should be doing the performance assessment system for homeschoolers and private schools or Christian schools?
No, you
So
were
that
talking about,
so that there's equity across the board with publicly funded education?
no, you were talking about evaluation of the program. Now I'm just raising the point that, there's evaluation questions that can be raised at the public school level as well.
Well, the public schools have metrics, and they're available to all of us. You know, the State Board of Education has approved HISIT, so we can use those. Should we require that students take the HISIT before when they turn 18 if they're an EFA student? Is there should they be able to pass that test?
Okay, so now you have the test for the public school students.
Mm-hmm.
And how do they fare on the test? Would you say that they're all between 90 and 100?
Well, that's,
No. And that's the reason that parents like to have a choice to send the child somewhere else. Because I think that has been
Yes.
so over and over again, our public schools are not doing the job that we expect them to do. Why? I don't know.
then perhaps that is a separate conversation
We have,
as to how we should be investing more of our time and at the local level in improving our own public schools. But this commission is talking about how we spend the money that we spend on EFAs and what we should do about those students who are getting public dollars in the EFA. So if we use proficiency scales in the public schools, should we also apply those proficiency scales for homeschool students and at the private school level and require that those private schools, be part of our programming because the students are collecting these dollars? I don't know, this is what we're supposed to be deciding. Maybe that's a good idea to put in the report, that needs to be evaluated, that proficiency needs to be evaluated for any student taking an EFA voucher and applying it to Concord Christian Academy or, the Bishop Girton or whatever school.
then we have to change the recommendations from the Oversight Committee, from the RSA that we have. Shall monitor the implementation of RSA 194-F, including the impact of state education funding to local district schools. It doesn't say anything about it evaluating every EFA student, wherever they are, to see that they are getting a good education. That is not in there. We have to assume that if they go to another school with the help of EFA dollars, that they are going to a school that it will educate them and that suits their educational needs. Because I think we have learned that not all kids learn the same way, in the same environment. That's why we have choice.
Right. Right.
And I think I don't see it as being very realistic. We have about 5,000 EFA students right now, something like that, to go and check in on every one of them to see how they are doing and evaluate them with some sort of a metrics. I think one of the best indicators is that people who have had the choice in education in the lower levels, when they go to college, they do very well. They have learned all kinds of things, discipline and good teaching, good ways of learning, that it helps them. Right now, we have a whole mess of kids starting out in college and need the first year to be remedial instruction because they can't follow a college curriculum because they haven't learned enough. So I think that there are a lot of things we need to do in education. I think we need to really take a good hard look at what we're doing, how it is done, and what the kids are learning and how.
Respectfully, with comparing students who are wildly successful after not attending a New Hampshire public school when they enter college, how are you getting that information? It seems anecdotal at best, and we don't have any measure. We just have some really great stories, and we have equally as many stories of students who are unprepared to move on.
But
So
you have
we don't have any data, Senator.
Well-
There's nothing that says they're doing great. We
I
don't have that.
I
Doesn't
have
exist.
read reports from colleges that are very upset at the level of understanding the first grade, first year students.
From
that
New
they-
Hampshire students, from New Hampshire.
Well, I'm assuming so because that's what I've read. But it could be that they cost more than New Hampshire students. I can't say for sure because I don't have the pieces of paper in front of me. But the fact is that they are not getting the education that they should. Representative Black.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This issue of proficiency is an issue that we're, in the policy committee, we're seriously trying to address. It's something that is not new to this state. Paul Leather, years ago, who was Deputy Commissioner of Education, had a task force to look at mathematics, and the results of that task force were, we better get on it. And now, Paul's been gone for quite a while. That task force had to be approximately 10 to 12 years ago, as I recall, and we had it when I was, early on in the House here. The issue also, how do we track kids when they go from high school to community college or to a four-year, is something that I look at seriously, being on the Higher Education Study Committee and also as a trustee at the University System of New Hampshire. We do know that talking with our folks from the community college system, if you look back at the data they had approximately 4 years ago, 60% of our kids that leave high school have a hard time with mathematics at the community college system. Of that 60%, half of them never get a two-year degree. This is not just an issue for EFAs or homeschoolers or public, it's an issue for the state. And I think there's not a person in this room who doesn't understand or recognize that our math scores in the state are low. Very, very low. And when you start wanting to use a particular instrument, for example, like EFA or homeschoolers, we got to make sure that instrument is paralleling the curriculum and instruction that's being taught at home, and align somehow with our academic standards. If we can never get a better handle on what our academic standards are, we spent 3 hours this morning trying to figure it out. So there's a lot we have to do here, but it's not just EFAs. It's all children in the state here are needing more support in this area, and I'm not so sure that by more money is the answer on this all the time. We need to have a system of accountability, or we have to have a system of better understanding what we're doing. And I talked with the superintendent of schools in my school district, and she recognized that unfortunately she is now gone, and we've had a change of administration. But with that, she was looking at redoing the math program and looking from elementary right through high school. And we're measuring how we're functioning, not necessarily by the achievement score, the proficiency score, which is rock bottom, but growth. We're trying to look at the growth of the individual. Are we seeing growth? And if we're seeing growth, it means we're doing something. But this is not unique to any one program. An EFA is a program, just as our regular school program or the charter schools is the regular programs. And there are some charter schools, for example, like North Country Charter, which was a result of superintendents in the North Country getting together and saying, we need to form this charter that can better assist some of these students which have these unique issues, whether they be IEP or disciplinary issues. That charter has done extremely well and successful with the graduation rates and with those going on. It takes a unique teacher to do that too. So it's a very complex issue here, but I don't want to go after one program versus another program. We need to be collectively addressing all education in the state. Thank
to the report?
Yes, we've been talking about the report the whole time.
I understand that, but
Let's go
making,
with it.
making specific suggestions.
Yep.
Okay. I have a suggestion that, in moving, hopefully, in moving the EFA program back under the Department of Education,
Was it ever there?
moving the EFA program under the Department of Education, how's that? That allow us in rulemaking perhaps, maybe specific, to approve categories of educational expenses. Because right now, we, as a legislature, have no input into the categories of educational expenses. And there's no rulemaking to apply that. And that is definitely a source of heartburn for the implementation of this program and confusion. So that, what an educational expense is, should definitely be something that is done in rulemaking.
Okay, so you want established categories of allowable expenses?
Exactly.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I'm looking at a form here which we received on EFA expenditures, report year one. And when you're talking about categories, I'm becoming a little bit confused here. Because we have educator, provider / vendor by category, and it lists these categories, starting with computer hardware, internet connectivity, going right down the whole list, until you get to the specific tuition type schools. Is this what we're looking for, or because if they're doing this,
How do you get well, it's not completely, and that's actually what the paper you're holding has, the reporting on that is incredibly loose. We know that there are approved vendors on our approved vendor program who never asked to be approved vendors. They were just folded in. So, there's no, we didn't approve who should be a vendor and who might not be appropriate to be a vendor.
You mean we, the legislature?
Exactly. So the Department of Education also doesn't have any input on that. We don't, when we say educational expenses, hardware, what does that mean? I do know what hardware is, and I also know that there's some hardware. Is a PS5 a good use of an educational voucher? That's hardware. That has internet access. Should we be doing that, or are we only buying laptops? And are we buying software for those laptops? And what software is part of approved vendors? Are we approving vendors? How are we approving schools that are on our approved vendor list? What's the criteria? I don't know. Do you? Nobody knows, because we don't know how that assessment was made.
I would suggest that the Department of Education has criteria and information available on approval of the non-public schools.
I know that.
Are you looking that up?
No,
Is
it's
there-
something
okay,
else.
something else.
Sorry.
Okay, no worries. I thought I was waiting, so I'll look it up myself.
They're looking into schools because I read a report very recently on how the schools are rated and they check them out to be no problem. Something needs to be fixed, so this school is failing and they're giving some suggestions for how to fix them. So it does take place. The schools are evaluated.
Well, I mean, we did,
Quality.
we had a school, and I asked in a previous meeting, we had a school that was on, it is on our approved vendors list, that came up in a very troubling report from Granite State News Collaborative about being included as a potential hate group. And there's no evaluation process of like what happens when there's a school that rises up as some, with extremely troubling information that comes around it, and yet it stays on our approved vendor list? Why? And do we have to is there a form we fill out to ask, like, why is this school on this list? How do we get this school evaluated? What's the evaluation for it? And it's a private school. It's, they purport to be a Catholic school, but they're not part of the Catholic diocese. They can do what they want. They're a private school, but we're also paying them to do this. And we're now here, and we hear troubling reports, and there's no evaluation. Like, that doesn't seem to make anybody's, hairs on the back of your neck stand up a little bit, like, wow, this should be, maybe we should look into this.
So on the other hand, you know that there are a lot of things being said and picked up, and you really need to go back in and look and see whether it's true or not. You can't just go by one report, and I think that happens with a lot of things.
Well, there's two,
So-
and we also got word from the Manchester diocese that this is not a program of the diocese. And they also told the New Hampshire community that they are not an approved part of the Catholic Church, and yet a lot of people thought it was a Catholic school. Turns out it's not.
Just because one left-leaning group says something, some school or some person is a hate school or a hate person, doesn't necessarily mean it's true. I've been called a lot worse. Some people might agree with that. I would disagree. But just because some groups, like the Southern Poverty Law Center, says that a certain group, a certain school is a hate school or teaches hate, I would not find credible. And I believe I'll try and find it. I have the rebuttal to that article from the school itself, and I'll try and locate that.
Is that the editorial you gave us at the last meeting, or 2 meetings ago? I think I still have that. That was an editorial from a Catholic magazine. It's not a.
Possibly, I
Yeah.
don't recall.
Because I have 3 suggestions from you, Senator.
Yes.
A BFA under the DEA, establish categories of allowable expenses,
Yes.
and then this should be approved by the DOE.
Also, come up with a measurement for how students who participate in the voucher program are progressing through their education. We have a way to do that. We use competency-based learning, and we have made mention of competency-based learning in the program, in our 194F, but we just say, do a portfolio. But then the Department of Education doesn't look at that portfolio. We don't find out what's in the portfolio. We don't know what the competency-based learning might have been if they're even using that kind of a program. So my suggestion, and you know what, I'm happy to send these to you in writing, so you don't have to keep jotting them down, or I'll give them to representatives so we can get them in the minutes.
Yeah, but we still have to have a report done, so
Well-
there's no problem writing this thing down.
All right,
So
so I will
what
send
you're
you my,
suggesting that each student who receives EFA funding should have, it be evaluated according to certain metrics, to be sure that they're progressing.
yes,
That's a lot of work, and who's gonna do it?
well, it's a lot of money, so. Because
Not that much money.
if we bring it under the Department of Education, then we're not spending money on a third-party vendor out of New York to, you know, run a program for us.
Okay,
We're
well, we
bringing
can-
it back, so that money would be coming, essentially would be coming back, wouldn't it? So we would be able to use that money ourselves and oversee it ourselves.
Each EFA student should be evaluated.
So additionally, you know, if we bring it back home to New Hampshire, we would be able to develop a centralized accountability system to provide information to families about these programs that are approved vendors, because these providers would have uniform accountability within the system. They would have conditional approval, because we would have a uniform program, way of evaluating whether they should be an approved vendor. And we'd be able to share that assessment data. Additionally, annual audits of qualifications to be in the program. So similar to, you know, any other financial aid program that runs, that there should be an annual application,
Let's put that in
annual income verification.
every year.
Yeah.
Representative Ladd,
I'm not gonna sign on to any report that's gonna cause us to somehow give a nationally norm reference test or objective test of some kind to K through 2. I am not gonna do it. I've been there as a school principal, as a teacher, and I do not think that's gonna be reflective of growth. You're going to have to rely upon the teacher, the parent, and we do that for our public school students. If you can show me a norm reference test or a statewide test that we use for grades K through 2, then I might comply with what you're requesting. But I don't think we have it, and I don't think we do it, and I don't think we should be asking the DOE to do this when we know it's not being done for the K through 12 public schools.
okay?
Madam Chair, we were talking about the education trust fund and the uses of that, and I just found the statute. Could I just reference a couple of the uses? It's RSA 19839, education trust fund created and invested. Some of the uses of that money from that trust fund are to go to municipalities for the adequate education grants, distribute kindergarten grants to municipalities and school districts, provide low and moderate income homeowners property tax relief, phase out grants to school districts, funds necessary to provide a statewide assessment program, to fund Department of Education operating costs for student data collection and reporting system. Let's see, school building aid, to distribute tuition and transportation funds to school districts for students attending career and technical education programs. Those are some additional uses of the education trust fund.
Instead of 198,
30:39.
colon 39, okay, good.
Can I follow up?
Representative
I'd like to follow up a little bit on what I was talking about K through 2. I know that, for example, if you're a first grade teacher, you're going to have certain performance goals, academic standards, whatever we're going to call them, that you want to ensure that the child has in order to go into grade 2. Children ought to be able to count to 100. Recognize their letters and start putting these letters together, and hopefully with some of the basic reading, phonetic, phonemic, fluency skills, vocabulary. So it's possible to put something like that together, some basic criteria, but it's something you don't do through a norm reference test. You gotta do that through working with that child, eyeball to eyeball, and to ensure that and you're gonna see growth. But there again too, to do it accurately, you've got to be there and you have to be seeing the student over the period of the year. Where they are, where are they now? So you can see that growth occur. So I still stand by what I said, that we should not be thinking, going down the direction of some kind of an assessment test, norm reference test or statewide test for K through 2. We're not asked to do that by the federal government. The federal government says you start at grade 3 and work your way on up to where we finish here with one test in the high school, which is grade 11, we use the SAT, or possibly the ACT in the state. Thank you.
So, are you saying that what Senator Alshaw is suggesting, you would agree with, if it excludes kindergarten too?
Yeah, those grades right there, we're not gonna get any data back that's any worth its salt or worth the money we put into it for K through 2. It's not gonna demonstrate what we really want to know, what the child has learned in relation to that basic criteria for that grade level. And those are established. I know my own grandson's first grade right now, the teacher, when we had teacher conferences, which I went to as well, laid out, this is what we want to see your child achieve in grade 1. I think that's great. And I don't know if it's the same all over the state or not, from school to school, but it's something that's worth pursuing.
So each EFA student should be evaluated for progress, excluding kindergarten through 2nd grade.
No. Now, I'm not saying progress, because we want to see progress and growth, but how we do that assessment through using an instrument or using these other forms of measurement to determine growth.
We'll write this down with double space and the plenty of things to check,
Okay.
to delete and to add. Representative Cadelli?
Yeah, I think that I would have issues with that, in that we would be asking for data from private schools. I'm not sure how we do that. In addition, we're not talking just about schools that a child is sent to with an EFA. There are a variety of options available, online courses, tutors, therapies. There are a variety of options that can be chosen from for a parent to get the education that that child needs. So I don't think that there is one particular place you can go for many of the EFA children.
So with respect to what Representative Cordelli just said, agree that, it, perhaps with the private schools, if the private schools find reporting out progress to be too much of a burden, then they would have to pull themselves out of being an approved vendor, because that could be one of our criteria, is that if you have a student that's accepting New Hampshire taxpayer dollars for an EFA voucher, that you have to participate, in accepting this voucher money, you have to report out information about how that student is progressing. Now, if they don't want to participate and they don't want to report out data, and make no mistake, most schools are keeping data on all their students, then that's fine. They don't have to, because again, choice. But if you want to be an approved vendor of the Department of Education in New Hampshire, then there should be some criteria of assessment, and that might be proficiency, which speaks to what Representative Ladd was talking about, as in the younger grades, the proficiency is not a normed test. It is based on the growth of the child and appropriate developmental goals, of which we have measures of what's an appropriate developmental goal for a 6, 7, and 8-year-old.
Okay. I think we have enough to do a draft.
I'd like to add a couple more things in, Madam Chair.
You can add as much as you want.
Yep, I'd like to add in that the EFAs be limited or the approved vendor list be limited and exclude vendors that have discriminatory admission policies.
So how are you gonna check that?
Exactly. That would as an approved vendor, they would have to affirm that they do not.
Who is gonna check it?
That would be part of applying to be an approved vendor.
Right,
Well, who checks the approved vendor list now?
I don't know, I think they have
Exactly.
experience with them.
We have to find out, like, how do you get on the approved vendor, and why do we not ask these questions? To be an approved vendor,
So then you have to, okay, then you have to write down, what is it, what qualifications do you wanna list?
that if you are going
Okay, so
to,
ABC is asking me to be an approved vendor. What am I looking for? What criteria do I have to decide whether or not ABC should be an approved vendor?
well, that would be, like I said, bringing it under the Department of Education, because right now, we don't get that information shared with us, is how approved vendors are approved.
So you want the
So we
Department
have-
of Education to take over this as well?
This would be part of the rulemaking, yeah, because this is information that we are not privy to. What policies are for admissions. Additionally,
Okay.
I would like for our EFA program to prohibit private schools from making EFA applications a requirement or prerequisite for applying for additional financial aid from their school.
Why don't you write down all the things that you want?
Okay, I have this.
Because I think that
Exactly.
then there will be a separate page for your wish list. In addition to the things that we have to respond to from the RSA that we have, from the RSA. Is that fair enough?
Yeah, I think it
Okay.
fits right into the RSA, so
Okay.
I will reference it in
You
my list. How's
Type
that?
that up, double spaced, at least 12, when you're.
Kind of a 15 kind of gal, because I'm also
Fine,
going
we can
blind.
do that makes it easy on our eyes,
Mhm,
so,
mhm.
okay,
I print things out in 18.
oh, okay.
Beat me.
Double-sided
I
though.
go 16.
So,
Okay, double
You
sided.
can tell.
Yeah, right, yeah.
My screen is set to so large.
Okay, I think that we have discussed this a fair amount, and, I will take on myself to go through, to write up the basic stuff that it needs to go in this memorandum. And I will do it double spaced, and I will do what we have done so far. Senator Altshuler will write up a page of her particular desires, wishes for this report, and we'll bring it. Do you want another meeting? It'll be after the election.
We're gonna have to compare and contrast our,
That's right.
By the
Our
way, we
work.
met with a third meeting for the 306 rules.
I know you added up another date, and I wrote it down.
What was the date?
I believe the
23rd?
29th.
29th. 9 o'clock in the morning. You're quicker than I am.
Takes another day.
Yeah, it takes the month, it takes another day.
Yeah, I noticed that. I didn't bring my date book, so.
You're looking at this month?
November?
Yeah, it will be November. So the 5th is on a Tuesday.
Yep.
It's 9 a Friday.
No, the 8th is the Friday, and then the following week is 11 through 15.
Do you wanna do 11?
That's Veterans Day.
Veterans Day.
That's Veterans Day.
On the
11 would not
12th,
be
I
it.
have an afternoon meeting here.
Do what?
On the 12th, I got the civics meeting.
At 2 to 4, wait.
You got it? Yeah. Yeah, you do too. What about the morning?
The 12th.
One trip.
November December 12th?
One
Okay.
trip,
I'll be on a trip on the 15th.
all right, so did you say the morning of the 12th?
Yeah.
You're talking about 10 o'clock or 9:30
Sure.
or what? Chair?
The 10 a.m. on the 12th? Okay. And we'll have basic draft. Senator also will have a page with all she wants to have done on the EFAs. And I will write down what we have done from the previous recommendations and what has taken place and what we have done with that. And then, of course, at the end, all the minutes of the meetings will be included.
That was 10 a.m.
When is your second meeting? One, are we, so we
No,
anticipate,
it starts at 2 over
Oh.
at Granite State.
will we anticipating wrapping up no later than noon though, right?
No later than what?
Noon?
I hope so.
Okay, great, all right.
And Aaron will arrange for a room for us. And they to the thing is, we still have some time if this report is not due until November 30th. So if there are some other things we need to work on, we have time to have it. So even this is a rough draft, we have time to finish the draft and send it out to everybody to look at. So, number 12.
We need to thank Matt for doing these minutes.
Yes, right.
He does a great job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
in that.
Thank you.
Yeah, we need to put him on a few other committees.
We can borrow you from.
Anything else that we need to cover today? I think we've had a rather robust conversation. Should bring us some fruitions in this thing. Okay. Let's take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?